You might see it as just an uncomfortable utilitarian four-wheel drive pretending to be a family car.
These 2.8 diesels are actually one of the more reliable diesel engines out there, but they're not perfect.
It feels like it's been built to take an absolute hiding. Okay, in this video, we are going to show you everything that can go wrong with these. We're going to show you how they're aging, what they're like to live with and drive, and we're going to tell you if we think you should buy one or not. But before we get to all of that, here's the basics. We all know sharing is caring, and the 2015 to technically current Fortuner shares a load of hardware with the 8th generation Toyota HiLux. They feature the same platform, same engine, transmission, even the windscreen, the front doors and the bonnet are all the same. However, the interior treatment and exterior design are different. The Fortuner swaps out the HiLux's rear leaf springs for a coil setup, and the Fortuner seats 7, whereas the HiLux, it can accommodate dozens. Now, as far as trim specs go, you have 3 to choose from, and the Fortuner was updated a few times during the life cycle, most substantially in 2020. It gained more power, better fuel efficiency, a handful of specification and tech changes, and a refresh in the design department. This whole ute-based SUV thing puts it head-to-head against the Ford Everest, the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport, and the Isuzu MU-X, although it also faces some stiff competition from closer to home. Toyota claims the Fortuner fills a hole between the RAV4 and the Landcruiser Prado, while giving an alternative to the larger and more road-biased Kluger. So in one way, it could be seen as the perfect balance between an excellent family car while still having some phenomenal off-roading chops. Or you might see it as just an uncomfortable utilitarian four-wheel drive pretending to be a family car. Although, because it is suffering from, let's say, an identity crisis, it doesn't sell all of that well, so you could pick up a bargain. So pricing kicks off from around about $20,000 here in Australia and tops out at a bit under $80,000. But this means that these are generally asking a few $1,000s less than an equivalent Ford Everest. But then compare it to, let's say, an equivalent Prado, and you could be saving up to $20,000 with the Fortuner. And speaking of saving a fortune when it comes to buying cars, make sure you hit the driver link down below. Look, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details in this video. That link down there will explain everything, but just know Driver exists to get you the very best possible finance deal. Also, that link, it could get you $150 worth of free fuel if you get your finance through a Driver. Now, I know we've been comparing this to the Everest and the Prado, but here's a fun fact for you. This is nearly 200 kilos lighter than the Prado and nearly 300 kilos lighter than the Everest. Now, as far as the exterior goes, quite a few owners have complained that there are nowhere near as many accessories available for these as there are for the HiLux that they're based on. Plus, apparently, it's really hard to legally fit larger tires. However, it does come with all of the off-roading equipment that you would expect, although compared to some of its competition, some of the exterior features can be a little bit sparse. And the same can be said inside, although when we're referring to the lower and earlier spec models, there are 2 ways of looking at this potential lack of features on offer. To the critics, it's ridiculous that a vehicle of this age and price misses out on a lot of phone connectivity, multi-zone climate control, and a whole host of other features that the opposition provides. But then on the flip side, to many fans, this just means less stuff to go wrong. In fact, many owners mentioned to us it was this lack of superfluous features that convinced them to buy the Fortuner in the first place. And anyway, if you do want leather and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and more bells and whistles, just look at a more recent and higher spec example. Although just on using some of the tech, Toyota infotainment systems can be complete rubbish. So no matter what generation, maybe budget for an aftermarket infotainment system to prevent you from forcing your fist through the screen. Now, obviously with each upgrade, what each individual trim spec will receive will vary. If you do need all the specific details, head to ReDriven.com and check out the totally free ReDriven cheat sheet. It'll answer all of your questions. Another area that these cop some criticism is in that a lot of people claim they look and feel cheap and nasty. This is a 2018 GXL, and I don't know, look, it's not the last word in luxury in here, but it's certainly not bad. I even like the brown fabric on the seats. There's some little soft touch pieces here and there. But overall, this is designed to be a resilient, almost workhorse of an SUV, and I think it nails the brief. As far as the comfort and ergonomics go, the seats, again, not the last word in comfort. There are comfier seats out there, but they're not uncomfortable at all, and there's a good amount of adjustment. And even the materials used, okay, lots of hard, scratchy plastics everywhere, but again, it's designed to be a resilient family SUV. It nails it. Actually, speaking of resilience, let's talk wear and tear. This thing has over 50,000 kilometers on it. It is used on a daily basis as a family car, and wear and tear is really quite good. There's still texture on the steering wheels. Some of the gloss black plastics that I would assume would scratch up because they're in high traffic areas, in this car, they're pretty good. Obviously, every example is going to be different from car to car, depending on their use. Some of the fabrics in here could do with a bit of a detail. I think with a solid detail in here, this would come up a treat. Then as far as practicality goes, loads. So you've got an upper glove box, you've got a lower glove box there. The pockets and the doors are excellent. There's also a little cubby hole here for any kind of life filth or life secrets even. There's a cool little center cubby hole here, 2 cup holders here, a spot perfectly designed for your phone just under there. Some people claim that there's nowhere to put a real man's coffee. We're talking a piccolo or a double ristretto, but there is, because in these pull-out cup holders, they slide out quite nicely. Also, what's handy with this, as we found out when ordering this one, which was hotter than the sun, you can then direct the air vents for the air conditioning to hit your piping hot coffee and cool it down so you can actually consume it. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly 9.44 tuners tall. This is in my driving position, and it's interesting. Loads of legroom, loads of footroom, and it's quite a spacious cabin. But bloody hell, the seats are firm. I feel like I'm in a chiropractic practice at the moment. Overall, despite the very firm seats, quite comfortable back here. As far as wear and tear in this particular example, really good. As I said, this does get used on a daily basis, but you never tell. Black plastics haven't been scratched up. The fabric in the seat still feels really good, except for being too firm. But overall, great wear and tear. Then as far as practicality in the back seat, you've got a little pocket here with a 12-volt power outlet, little hooks for your groceries or maybe your backpack after school, map pockets, your own set of air vents up here, good sized door bins, and you don't need to cut off your leg to actually get to the door bin, and a pull down armrest with a transformer style cup holder setup. Now getting into the third row, this is my first ever attempt at this, so let's see how we go. What gymnastics are required? Hardly any. That was a breeze. How much space? Yeah, it's not, oh hang on, put the headrest up, make it a bit nicer. That's not too bad. Not obviously the comfiest place to be, but honestly better than I was expecting. Also, you can change the angle of the backrest here and the backrest here. As far as wear and tear back here, none. And as far as practicality back here, your own air vents, got some storage cubby holes here. I don't think there's any specific cup holders as such, but not too bad. Although, you know, it does feel a little claustrophobic because these windows are quite small. Then as far as practicality in the boot goes, this is the issue with 7-seat SUVs. When you've got all 3 rows in place, there's hardly any storage back here. Although obviously if you stow the third row away, oh God, hang on. Like so, no, wrong one. Hang on. What am I doing wrong? Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, when you store the third row away, way more space. I'll show you how much. But this raises an interesting point. Some owners actually remove the third row seating to give you more cargo space back here. The problem is in some areas doing so is completely illegal, and that can potentially void your insurance if you have a crash and they notice that there's something illegal going on in the back of the car. And obviously also when you fold these things forward, way more space back here. Also on practicality, and I completely forgot to mention this on the day we were filming, we need to talk about towing. The towing capacities are rated at 3,000 kilos for the automatic and 2,800 kilos for the manual. And that might sound pretty decent, but as a few owners mentioned, once you add front and rear bars, an auxiliary fuel tank, water tanks, and whatever other accessories, the Fortuner is going to be bloody close to its GVM and not leaving much for tow ball mass. Plus, there are hardly any GVM upgrade kits out there, so if you're after a vehicle to do some serious towing, maybe this isn't it. Not to mention a GVM upgrade is probably going to make the thing ride like a flogged out skateboard. Okay, so what's it like to drive? Well, it's more truck-like than many of its competitors, but personally, I really like that. I just like that it's not trying to hide its tough underpinnings. It feels like it's been built to take an absolute hiding. Look, I'm not suggesting for a moment that we're talking 1980s style full drive driving characteristics, and it is way better than a HiLux, but an Everest and even a Pajero Sport top this for driving comfort. And anyway, if you want more refined suspension and handling, just fit a quality aftermarket setup. That will work wonders. Plenty of YouTube videos have proven how phenomenal these can be deep off-road, but even at the normal, everyday, sensible stuff like parking and maneuvering in traffic, this just does the job. The overall parameters are pretty easy to judge, and it feels like there's actual communication between the steering wheel and the front wheels, so dealing with tight spaces is super easy. A few people have criticised the lack of grunt from this engine, but for me, it's fine. It's not supposed to be a fast vehicle. It's not a performance SUV. The engine, it does the job. Actually, just on the engine as well, as in terms of fuel consumption, this car's seeing in the 9s, and apparently according to many owners, that's about what they're seeing as well. Although one thing that might put you off, unlike the Everest and the Pajero Sport that can be driven in basically all-wheel drive on a sealed surface, this is rear-wheel drive only until you get to a loose surface. Look, that's not a deal breaker for me because these things still feature a whole host of safety features. Actually, you know what? To take you through the safety equipment that you can expect, how about we let somebody from this car's country of origin talk you through it? It's my Thai mate, Akara.
คุณสามารถคาดหวังได้ว่าจะมีถุงลมนิรภัย7ตำแหน่งเสถียรภาพและระบบควบคุมการยึดเกาะถนนแบบ Active ที่ปรับให้เหมาะกับสภาพท้องถิ่นและเบรกป้องกันล้อล็อกตั้งแต่ปลายปี 2019 เป็นต้นมาเราได้เพิ่มระบบความปลอดภัยก่อนการชนระบบควบคุมความเร็วคงที่แบบ Active และการแจ้งเตือนการออกนอกเลนรุ่นที่สูงขึ้นได้รับการตรวจสอบจุดบอดและการแจ้งเตือนการจราจรด้านหลังตั้งแต่ปี 2021
Okay, so what goes wrong with these? It's a Toyota. Surely nothing, right? No, that's not exactly the case. Starting with the exterior, it depends on who you speak to, but some owners claim the paintwork is incredibly resilient. Other owners claim that it'll scratch if an overweight fly accidentally lands on it. Actually, just on the owners, Matt, mate, thank you so much. Thanks for lending us your Fortuner. Also, Fortuner owners groups and forum members, thank you so much for all of your knowledge and advice. We couldn't have made this video without you. You guys are legends. Now, elsewhere on the exterior, look, we couldn't really find any other common faults as such, just a few complaints. A few owners complained that there's no off position for the headlights, except for turning the car off. Many owners complain that the rear view camera isn't in the middle. Apparently the alarm button on the key fob can be triggered far too easily if it's in your pocket. Another thing that owners of not just these, but all vehicles complain about, the cost of OEM wiper blades. Luckily that Wiper Tech link down there can help you with that because you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping on some of the best wiper blades we've ever used. And this one isn't specific to the Fortuner, but many owners of used four-wheel drives find that when they buy the car and it's fitted with accessories, some of those accessories don't work. If you're buying one and it's got gear on it, just make sure it all works. Also, make sure it's fitted professionally. Actually, you know what? Just go and watch our Ultimate 4x4 Buyer's Guide. That'll talk you through the whole process. Now, inside, there aren't really any common faults. Again, just more kind of complaining. Actually, it's important to know that these things are often used as taxis in parts of Asia and the subcontinent. So they are built to be super tough and resilient, hence the lack of exterior and interior issues. But back to the complaints. Many owners have claimed that their piano black plastic center console treatment can scratch really easily. The plastic trim around the door handles, that can scratch really easily as well. The door handles themselves, apparently to many owners, feel a bit too flimsy. Some models' USB ports only pump out 500 milliamps. What, like is this 1996? And again, apparently the cup holders don't hold piccolos and espressos. They do. But look, what about mechanically? We've all heard of stories about DPF dramas and apparently Toyotas aren't as reliable as they once were. Are there any truth to these claims? I can't tell you because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but Jim is.
Look, the biggest problem you're going to see with these is from the DPF and probably more accurately the fifth injector. A lot of problems there. I'm not even going to mention the ongoing class action against Toyota, but basically it's important to know that these DPF issues and the fifth injector issues are nearly always covered by some sort of extended warranty from Toyota. Yeah, it is a widespread problem and it's pretty serious too, because if you had to pay for it, it'd be very expensive, but basically Toyota are all over it. Pre-2018, they had a few issues with their EGR cooler leaking internally. Again, Toyota mostly are covering that under warranty too. There are plenty of reports of the early batch of these 1GD engines having issues with their timing chains, and some reports in later models too. Again, Toyota are covering a lot of it under extended warranty. Now, just on those problems, it's important to have some perspective here. You have to remember that there's millions of these things on the road. Now, the actual percentage of these things that are having problems is actually a relatively small percentage. All these things being covered by some sort of extended warranty is great, but there are some dealerships out there that offer some resistance, but from what we gather, most of the time, if you just really force the issue, most of the time they yield. Now, onto some slightly less complicated and expensive issues. One thing to look out for if you own one or if you're servicing or whatever, the air filter housing on these things is pretty weak and the back of it can break off. Now, that can have some ongoing issues. If that's broken off and the filter is not being sealed properly, that leads into another problem they have with some dust getting into these things. Now, sometimes the dust is building up on the MAF sensor and making the car go into limp mode. and creating all sorts of issues there. Your best bet there is if you have one, spend some bucks and put an aftermarket air filter housing on. It just fixes all of those problems. Another thing to mention with these air filter housings is sometimes that back section that breaks, there has been a few reports of that getting sucked down into the engine and damaging the turbo. So it's definitely something to look at if you have one, or maybe mention it to Toyota people, get them to check it. A lot of owners complain about vibrations under brakes, especially during and after towing. Look, once these rotors get hot and warped, there's no point at all in machining them. Don't even bother, just replace them. And speaking of the brakes, another huge problem with these is the park brake. A lot of people complain that it is just terrible. Now, it's important there, when you're adjusting this park brake, a lot of technicians trying to save time will just adjust it up actually at the park brake lever. That's the wrong way to do it. You need to back that adjustment point off and take the rear discs off and the calipers and adjust it at the rear brakes. Once you've got it adjusted there, then you can adjust the cable. But doing it the other way around, it'll never work. It'll always feel terrible and it'll never be right.
Okay, so after all of that, should you buy one of these? Look, obviously it's going to come down to each individual example, and it needs to have ticked all of the important pre-purchase inspection boxes. But as one owner put it, if you want a no bullshit workhorse SUV that will just get the job done, that also has the biggest support network of anything in this category, the Fortuner is it. However, if you want something with a more comfortable driving experience and all of the tech, buy something else. Maybe something else like this. But a question for you, if you wouldn't buy this or that, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. This paintwork is incredibly, a bit of a bargain when it comes to using it. To many of the fans, this just means less stuff to go wrong.